I'm planning on doing a video debunking Mgtow once and for all soon. Before I get to that point, I want to talk about Alexander Mgtow. While his channel had the best Mgtow content, his ideas still suffered from all the fatal flaws of other Mgtow content creators. While his analysis of the nuclear family was eons ahead of most Mgtow, his analysis of what has been called gynocentrism has no merit whatsoever. In fact, like most Mgtow, Alexander Mgtow has no real interest in addressing the plight of men. Like the rest of Mgtow, his only concern is with that of the ability of men to Mgtard. Initially, I was drawn to Mgtow around 2012 because of the uncensored and unapologetic ideas that were being delivered. It was truly refreshing to be a part of an online community of men sharing ideas. Content creators like Stardust put out uncomfortable truths that very few people were willing to discuss anywhere. They were seeing things that I'd always felt but had never been able to articulate. In the early years, Mgtow was able to truly shift the discourse. I honestly felt like we were on the verge of something new. I felt like some sort of international brotherhood was growing, built on a desire to exchange ideas and share perspectives. I had no idea where it was going, but I felt like some sort of community was growing. I even met some men online who I had shared ideas with. Meeting these guys in real life really highlighted some problems with Mgtow. The biggest problem with Mgtow became a lack of honesty. Now, truth and honesty are not the same thing. It is theoretically possible to be 100% truthful while being dishonest at the same time. Honesty relates to personal feelings and desires. While many Mgtow creators put out ideas that I could say were mostly truthful, they were not necessarily honest about their intentions, and they were not interested in the whole truth. Mgtow peaked in 2013. Starting in 2015, it really began to decline fast. The same old watered-down sound bites were being cranked out over and over again. In addition to a complete lack of solidarity, I noticed many Mgtow were completely dishonest about their positions. More and more disagreements were not being handled in a civil and honest manner. More and more I noticed many men that called themselves Mgtow were not willing to stand by the principles they claimed to believe in. Going your own way could mean anything as long as it excluded certain ideas which were not allowed to be discussed. More and more I noticed that this solidarity was merely a front for a wall of censorship and dogma. Alexander Mgtow initially seemed like he was different because his historical analysis was more accurate. However, he turned out to be the same. He recently did a video defending the draft for men. When challenged on his ideas in the comments section, he called people incels and even used pedo smears as a deflection tactic. After getting too much pushback for his bad ideas, Alexander Mgtow had a temper tantrum and took most of his videos down. He has only left one old video up for some reason, the last that I checked. Alexander Mgtow is what I would call a well-educated idiot. He's educated enough to dress up his post hoc rationalizations in a sophisticated cover and a vague appeal to progress and the greater good. His ideas don't evolve with new facts or a better understanding of reality. He just gets better with time at rationalizing what he wants to believe in and what he would do anyway. His channel is very representative of the Mgtow phenomenon. Mgtow started off with some semi-decent ideas, but then it became ossified and never evolved. As with most people, Alexander Mgtow wanted some way to understand the world. He saw some major flaws in the Mgtow ideology. His analysis of genuine traditionalism and plastic traditionalism was perfect. But like other men in the Mgtow community, he got to a point of understanding and then went no further. Alexander Mgtow's channel started off well, attacking tradcons and debunking their understanding of history and family structure. Tradcons falsely equate the nuclear family with a traditional extended family. Alexander Mgtow correctly pointed out how much tradcons pander to women and how it damages society. Like the rest of Mgtow, though, Alexander devolves into scapegoating, only instead of placing the blame on feminism, the left, and weak men, he solely lays the blame on the feet of tradcons, and even implies that tradcons force marriage and gender roles onto unwilling women. Even though he has never overtly stated it, he implies that feminism has been valid and necessary, and that it is traditionalism that holds men back. This is in fact very typical of the Mgtow phenomenon. Most Mgtow claim they are not tradcons and even attack tradcons, even if they themselves have very tradcon-like ideas. In fact, the only consistent thing they seem to agree on is that they are against modern marriage, or that they're not married because of the way things are for men right now. They are not against traditional gender roles per se, they just don't like the fact that men get thrown out by the family court. I have even heard many Mgtows use feminist-like rhetoric that makes it sound like men in the past had some sort of privilege. They have no problem slaving away for women, they just don't want to be discarded. After years of studying the Mgtow phenomenon, I can safely say that most Mgtow are not only anti-male, but have no principles or understanding at all. They have no problem with pandering to women as long as it's done in what they think is the right way that will keep their women around. They will blame leftist and weak men for the fact that marriage is no longer functional, conveniently forgetting that it was right-wing men that kept marriage alive only by sweetening the pot for women to the detriment of men at a time when marriage was on the decline. In their minds, only small groups of elite men pander to women for their own personal power. When other men pander to women, it is bad. When they pander to women, it is good. Alexander Mgtow is no different. It is just his assessment of traditionalism that is more accurate. He wants to pander to women, he just thinks that tradcons pander to them in the wrong way and screw it up for the rest of men. He still believes in traditional gender roles and maid guarding. He just thinks that marriage is an antiquated legal construction incapable of delivering what it once did in the past. He looks down upon married men for foolishly placing all their eggs in one basket. He wants to maid guard, he just recognizes lifetime monogamy for the farce that it is. He recognizes that there's always been a division of labor, but he argues that both men and women got something out of it in the past, and that women had to pull their weight. Like feminists, he believes men in the past had some sort of special privileges over women. He even believes men had the legal right to murder their spouses for cheating in the past. He has yet to provide any shred of evidence for this bold-faced assertion. How can any system that allows for murder benefit both sexes? Alexander Mgtow has a lot of strange contradictory ideas that don't add up. For example, Alexander Mgtow has a strange concept of opportunity cost when it comes to marriage. He seems to believe that in a marriage, women expect men to work extra hours to make up for the shortfall in female work. He implies very strongly that tradcons are so obsessed with traditional gender roles that they discourage women from working. In turn, women want men to make up the shortfall in hours she would have worked, or due to her having a kid. There are many problems with this theory. It is women who demand that they work less hours when they get married. It is not a burden that men even have the ability to demand women take on. Even married women who do not have kids work less hours than single women. Women have laws protecting their jobs when they become mothers, and they have had them for a long time. And women are still not changing their behavior. Alexander Mgtow attributes female behavior in marriage to rational economic self-interest. That is why he applied the concept of opportunity cost onto marriage. This is like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. On its face, his ideas are completely contradictory. He understands that the deal had to be sweetened for women in order to keep marriage alive, and yet he still thinks that men have some sort of power in marriage to demand that women stay home and make babies. Married couples get a tax break in most countries. It would make more sense for women to work alongside men from a rational economic point of view. It would make more sense for both working partners to pocket that tax break. Alexander is under some strange delusion that people come together in personal relationships out of purely cerebral economic necessity. I know this for a fact because he told me so over the phone. I'm sorry, but most friendships are not based on any business transaction whatsoever. Yes, people engage in a quid pro quo of some sort, but is usually based around recreational activities and some personal interests. In fact, any sort of business or living arrangements can be detrimental to most relationships. It is even more absurd to assume that men and women get together for purely economic reasons. Go to any dating site and all people are talking about is having fun and living life to the fullest. Nobody's talking about getting up at 4 a.m. to milk cows. Maybe this was the case in the past when people needed children to take care of them in old age and in sickness. But in a mechanized society, nothing could be further from the truth. To be sure, men and women often live together to save money, but this is not the primary motivation between such people entering a relationship. Men could just as easily room with multiple other men, which would actually make more economic sense. Most importantly, there's absolutely no economic necessity for people to be in a relationship in this day and age. Society is full of people that live on their own and get by. Even senior citizens receive some form of assistance in all developed Western countries. In fact, if anyone is entering relationships for economic reasons, it is women, not men. And it is not based around the family unit being some sort of functional economic unit. Yes, men and women become roommates in order to save money on rent, but they're not thinking about starting a family and having kids in order to cut down on the cost of living, let alone have children that act as labor. In fact, children are a massive liability in this day and age. You never see men pandering to other men the same way they pander to women. You never see women pander to men the same way you see men pander to women. Men pander to women because they want to be in a relationship with them, not because they extract some economic value from them or their children. Men have to make sacrifices to women in time and money to be in any sort of relationship with them, and marriage is a gamble for men. Women do not want or need men the same way that men want and need women. It is for this reason women get to define the conditions of the family unit. It is women who are in complete charge, and have been so for at least 50 years. Women have complete control of the reproductive process. They can give up their children at any time they want. Men, on the other hand, can be forced to pay for a child that's not even biologically theirs, and can be alienated from their own children. Women cannot be forced into any kind of relationship with a man whatsoever. Women are given preferential treatment in the workplace and have access to all kinds of government welfare that men do not. The only reason marriage still exists is because all the cost and risk is carried by men. Alexander Mgtow's belief seems to be very similar to the second-wave feminist marriage trap rhetoric. Second-wave feminism tried gaslighting society and pretending women were trapped in marriages. Alexander Mgtow is applying hyper-agency onto men. Couples were separating even if they were not able to legally divorce all throughout the 20th century. Arranged marriages were a thing of the past in the industrial West by the 20th century. Even in the past, when arranged marriage existed, it was both men and women that were forced into them. Alexander does acknowledge the marriage contract has been evolving precisely because men have had to make the terms of marriage better and better for women, but he thinks it's because women don't want to be stuck at home. If this was the case, you wouldn't see any stay-at-home mothers anywhere. Women could work full-time and get married at the same time. The truth is, if you look across all countries, married and single men work more, and married and single women work less. Another delusion that Alexander Mgtow seems to suffer from is that there's a natural equilibrium to relationships, and that they go through self-correcting cycles. He even denies there's such a thing as hypergamy, and that men being attracted to physical features in women is no different from women being attracted to men with professional careers. He even said that traditionalism forces women to be hypergamous because they are stuck with one partner. I'm sorry, but no woman is trapped inside any marriage in this day and age. In the past, women, like men, had less choices in relationships and were often stuck with one man. Marriages were often arranged for the man and woman by parents and the community. The whole point of traditional marriage was to place constraints on female hypergamy, not to create it. In this day and age, women choose who they can marry and can leave whenever they want. On these points, he's completely intoxicated on the feminist Kool-Aid. He may as well blame global warming on toxic masculinity. Alexander Mgtow has a false belief in rational economic self-interest. He has even said that what separates humans from other animals is the ability to make, store, and trade our sustenance. We don't just take what we need from nature and operate off of instincts. However, until about 10,000 years ago, humans literally did live like that, as we lived off the land, literally living only one day away from hunger. This, ironically, is a belief he shares in common with the right that he claims to despise. He believes that there's something uniquely rational and different about humans. If you study the history of capitalism and economics, you will realize that economics is not rational, as human beings are not rational actors, but very irrational ones. Economic bubbles are based on investors acting like irrational herd animals. People value things like colorful beads and shiny metal for reasons of mere aesthetics. Collapses can happen for no good reason, often caused by mere rumor or because something was hyperinflated to begin with. Most importantly, all these systems developed very slowly over long periods of time and continue to evolve to this day. None of them were designed and none of them are foolproof. Even the people at the top of our society do not have a full understanding of how things work. Our society is a complex chain of exchanges in which people are trying to maximize their own self-interest, often at the expense of other people. Nobody has ever run or designed any system for the greater good of all people in it. Self-correcting cycles seem to be a common belief amongst the right. They believe that a collapse cycle applies to all civilizations. This theory states that as a society gets more degenerate and weak, it causes a collapse, and then strong men rebuild it. In fact, no society completely collapses. Civilizations tend to rise and fall in global importance. Civilizations do regress, but they never regress that far or to a point lower than at which they started. Alexander Mgtow claims that there is gynocentric inflation in relationships, and that they will soon self-correct. The problem is this: how do you define gynocentric inflation? How will you define what an equilibrium in relationships is? When can you declare relationships fixed again? Human beings have instincts and drives, and those instincts and drives react in different ways in different environments. Industrialization and education have lowered birth rates and given women more comfortable options in society. The more options women have, the less they pick men. Women are less needy than men and do not value male company innately. Thus, women can leverage more out of relationships. Women do not value long-term relationships as much as men and are much more willing to end them, which gives women even more leverage in relationships. Of course, Alexander denies all this. Women are getting a good deal out of relationships, and there's no natural imbalance. There's never been a natural balance between men and women. Human beings evolved in conditions when we were all dead by age 40. Like all other life forms, we did what we had to do to survive and reproduce, with or without relationships. The relationship between men and women today is just a product of industrialization, making male physical labor irrelevant. Before the advent of sedentary agriculture, children were raised collectively by the tribe. Alexander assumes that there's always been some equitable and perfect quid pro quo between men and women until recently. He focuses on the raising of children, but throughout most of evolutionary history, men and women didn't even raise children together in relationships. Like right-wingers, he thinks nature is some efficient and equitable machine, and that human beings being rational are the pinnacle of evolution. The truth is, like all the other animals in the animal kingdom, human beings are driven by instincts that are not driven by conscious, rational thought. There are no natural and equitable relationships found anywhere in nature, let alone amongst human beings. Like all other life forms, human beings strive to get the most out of relationships, even if it's to the detriment of those they form relationships with. Alexander thinks shared parenting and the abolition of marriage will repair relationships between men and women. While I support shared parenting, I in no way think that it will solve the majority of men's problems. Countries like Scandinavia still have massive amounts of misandry. Men still work more than women there and still take on greater burdens in and outside of marriage. Most importantly, single men subsidize all the benefits couples with children can take advantage of there. Alexander never explained how shared parenting is supposed to address any of the slew of problems men face in society. Scandinavian countries have some of the most misandric laws in the world when it comes to sex, for example. I believe men and women are drifting apart. When I pointed this out on Alexander Mgtow's channel, he lashed out at me and called me an incel. Alexander is in denial of some basic realities. Even though he is smarter than most Mgtow, he still falls into the same traps of apathy and male hostility as well as denial. He believes things are already starting to change in favor of men, and that with time a new equilibrium will be reached without men having to lift a finger. Another way Alexander reminds me of right-wingers is that he's deeply dishonest about what he wants. Right-wingers claim they are pro-nuclear family, even though their policies make it much harder for lower-income people to afford one. The truth is that they are only pro-nuclear family for themselves. They want to hoard resources so that they can bribe a woman into a relationship. While Alexander's ideas make more sense than the rest of Mgtow, they will in no way benefit low-status men. The only men that will benefit from shared parenting are men that have enough status to begin with to get married and have a family. I'm not interested in Alexander Mgtow as a person, but his bad ideas are linked to his motivations and character. Alexander has tried to create original ideas, but at the core of it, he's still an egotistical Mgtow with a deep need to look down upon others, especially weak men and men he thinks pander to women. He's an elitist snob and deeply dishonest. He has many strange views that he has never expressed in his videos. He wants a fully integrated prison system as well as military, and he wants conscription for both men and women. I can't help but think he's trying to force men and women to be together. He also believes in quotas for women in the higher levels of society, and he thinks that all blue-collar work will be eliminated at some point. He doesn't want to say this, but what I think he really wants is to have some sort of new social contract between men and women in a highly mechanized society where any sort of division of labor is eliminated. Of course, he still wants men to be a utility to women, but as fathers and not just providers. He even has the bizarre idea that women in traditional but industrially developed countries want to have children but don't, because once they have children they are excluded from the workplace. He believes shared parenting will boost birth rates based off figures from France and Sweden. While there certainly is some truth to this, it is not just shared parenting alone that is boosting birth rates in those countries to above 2.0. One also has to take into account immigration, welfare, and the cost of living. Birth rates in Asian countries are in a massive decline because they are so densely populated, not just because they're more traditional than Western European countries. In essence, his worldview can be summed up as women want to have kids and be with men, but are choosing not to because of residual traditionalism and stupid traditionalist men. He has no real interest in addressing institutional misandry, and he has no interest in men's actual rights. He's just trying to find a way to fix the problems men face in relationships with women. He has no interest in addressing the problems that boys face in school. He's even stated that little shit 11-year-olds deserve to get beaten up by 15-year-olds. In fact, he has no interest even in addressing circumcision. He doesn't even think a ban is possible or desirable in a country like Germany where he lives. He literally told me Muslims are just going to have to westernize and integrate on their own. He believes Muslim societies are inherently backward and that you can never get them to give up their customs even with inside a first world country. He even said that in Muslim countries the police have to shoot at protesters, which is a very strange thing to say considering that so many Islamic countries are theocracies, and protesting in such countries would be some sort of indication that they want social change. I bring up circumcision because the circumcision issue because it is a men's issue that does not revolve around hyperagency. Nobody blames men for having their genitals mutilated. People just don't care. In this case, the same goes for Alexander Mgtow. He doesn't believe children deserve any extra protections, even if they happen to be male. Like a lot of people, he thinks it is up to the parents to do with their children as they see fit, but only if they happen to be male. Alexander Mgtow had his marriage fall apart, and he only got to have access to his daughter again because he got very lucky. His ex was an idiot and started acting up in family court. Alexander Mgtow did not fix his situation due to the ideas he had in his head. His life situation got better due to luck. Alexander Mgtow is okay. He has his strongman fantasies to soothe him. Other men can get bent as far as he's concerned. This is a major contradiction of most men, including Mgtow. Men want to fix relationships with women without addressing misandry in society at large. How the fuck exactly are women supposed to respect men in personal relationships when they don't respect men in society at large? Here's a screen cap of Alexander Mgtow's thumbnail in his last video. It is important to deconstruct this to get a better understanding of his motivations. You have a false dichotomy in the picture. On the one hand, you have the loser incel tramp who has control fantasies, romanticizes human relationships, is being cuckolded, and has mommy issues and is stuck in a perpetual mating cycle. This is just typical shaming of men for being needy losers. A lot of this is just Alexander Mgtow projecting his own failures, as he is a divorced dad who got alienated from his kid, while his kid got abused and neglected for 2 years. Alexander Mgtow may be projecting his own insecurities. He may be unsure of the parentage of his own child. Attacking a man for being a cuckold is attacking them for something beyond their control, as men have no legal right to mate, guard, and stop women sleeping around. If your wife or girlfriend wants to get pregnant with another man's child, there's nothing you can do legally to stop her. Attacking a man for being cuckolded is a tradcon obsession, as tradcons scapegoat so-called weak men for female behavior. Only deeply deranged nutcases tend to call other men cucks. On the other hand, you have the enlightened Mgtow, who has personal freedom and equality, which is nothing more than strongman posturing. Freedom is a concept that can only exist in the context of society. No man has equality when dealing with women, so any talk of freedom is delusional. Believing that you can have equality by having the right mindset is a control fantasy. Alexander Mgtow's accusation of control fantasies in other men is nothing but projection on his part. At peace with reality? If Alexander Mgtow is at peace with reality, why does he construct so many false concepts and rationalizations, especially ones that seemed designed to gratify the ego? Actually gets laid? Why is Alexander Mgtow bragging about this? For the longest time, Mgtow has been derailed by POAs because they never wanted to put forth a political platform. Not being able to get laid is the least of men's problems. Like the rest of what Mgtow's become, Alexander is just projecting new age, right-wing self-help philosophy. The truth is, any man can get laid if they're willing to spend a lot of time and money. Alexander Mgtow is a short, fat, ugly man who lost his virginity to a hooker and talks about the benefits of dating hookers privately. I have absolutely nothing wrong with prostitution. However, it is extremely hypocritical for him to attack other men for being incels. The only difference between him and an incel is the fact that incels would rather not pay for sex. Reaching into your wallet and handing over cash over to a hooker is nothing to be ashamed of, but it's nothing to be proud of either. Alexander Mgtow doesn't offer logic and facts, and he doesn't understand how personal relationships work. Alexander Mgtow's latest video is complete trash. It makes trite observations mixed in with empty platitudes. This thumbnail is deeply arrogant and is disparaging of other men. It says a lot about Alexander Mgtow's personality and his deep-seated need to look down upon other men. He resorts to personal anecdote and, ironically enough, paints a false simplistic view of the past. It is quite emblematic of how solipsistic and self-serving Mgtow content has become. What I want to focus on is his obsession with the draft, as it is one of the most anti-male positions he has. Only countries that are very small really need to draft anyone at all. Modern nation-states with expensive high-tech weapons, platforms, and high populations do not need to draft anyone. And the heads of most major armies do not want a draft, as they know that volunteer armies perform much better than drafted ones. When Alexander Mgtow talks about weak, limp-wristed men, he's just being anti-male and lashing out in resentment. He never talks about females the same way he talks about males. His desire to force men against their will to join the army and have years of their life stolen from them stems from him wanting to control the behavior and habits of low-status men. He even used man-up rhetoric in the comments section. He stated that we should be demanding that women step up instead of allowing men to step down. The problem is no matter how much he tries to socially engineer society, women in certain situations will always be able to get away with getting men to do the work and take on the risks for them. Average, everyday men pander to women, not just elite ideologues with an agenda. A fully integrated military and prison system will not stop men from pandering to women and will likely get men killed. Any talk about army benefits, education, or healthcare is a red herring. All these things a society should provide anyway. It is highly irrational to try to link those benefits to a pointless, futile waste of time. Drafting men is a complete waste of time, even if women were drafted equally as well. Alexander's assertions that joining the army can benefit people, providing structure and discipline, is completely baseless. I can point to the countless army vets who are a complete mess and are even homeless. Alexander admits himself that he has never been in the army. Like many resentful anti-male tradcons, Alexander wants to avoid hardship and live the easy life while enforcing hardship on other men. A desire to control and punish other men is a massive red flag and a sign of an unstable, nasty person. Alexander Mgtow wants to live in a comfortable echo chamber, and he will block anyone who challenges his ideas. He will smear people as pedophiles and incels and tell outright lies about them. He may have had some insightful ideas, but he's not interested in the truth, taking action, or helping men. Alexander Mgtow took his videos down, and I hope they remain down. I want to move on completely from Mgtow. I want to move on from toxic online spaces and toxic men in general. I want to focus on interactivism and other more positive things that will help improve the lives of all men. Mgtow has proven itself time and time again to be an anti-male echo chamber of closet tradcons. It is up to us to create an alternative for men.